Joe, can I just start with you? Can you just give us an explanation of what CAT modelling is and how you got into it?
Sure. So CAT modelling is a risk analysis tool, and it translates physical perils like hurricanes and earthquakes into financial losses. And it's a sub-industry of insurance, and it's been going for about 40 years. It's very mature. And it's the way that, insurance and reinsurance companies manage risk. They price risk, and they work out how much capital they need to hold in case a really extreme, rare event happens. So it really drives the economic resilience of the global society, really.
So if there wasn't catastrophe modelling, if there wasn't a way of estimating how it could all go wrong in that kind of mass claim event, then we would have insurers going out of business,
Absolutely.
The reinsurance market collapsing, and in the end people sustaining uninsured losses when they've paid for something.
Right.
And so is that accurate?
That's absolutely. So in the old days it was judgment, how much should we charge for the insurance. And then Hurricane Andrew really changed everything. It was a big loss. It was a shock, a surprise. And that was the beginning of computer simulation models, and that has kind of moved into full-scale catastrophe loss modelling. And as a result, we've got a lot more resilience, and we're a lot better at holding the right amount of capital and pricing risks for those extreme events.
Yeah, so it's always a dilemma, isn't it? Because I'm sure sort of doing the maths and doing it all properly and having the evidence base costs money and takes time, whereas people's kind of gut feeling was probably what was there before.
Absolutely.
How much more accurate is, or how different is the result of CAT modelling to the gut feeling? Is it? I mean, sometimes you think, well, people who are experienced in the field, they do have a sense of, this is a big one and so on. So how does the CAT modelling help the market to prepare?
Right.
And how accurate does it turn? Do you do the backwards thing of like, we've been preparing for a major earthquake, we've been preparing for a major hurricane. How accurate did it turn out to be?
Well, CAT models give you a range of outputs, a range of potential outputs, and it's a statistical output, and it gives you a basis for making decisions and making judgments. So it's not that they just are used blindly, they're used to support decision making.
So it's much less about using it as a predictor, were you right, were you wrong? It's much more about a business planning process.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's really trying to capture uncertainty and how you can make decisions under uncertainty. And in cyber, there's a lot of uncertainty. I'll give you an example that I think drives this home for cyber, which is boards right now are trying to figure out how much to spend on cyber risk. How much should I spend on my defenses and how much should I spend on insurance? And those are probably coming from different budgets, right? Or if you prefer, how much should I spend to prevent this event and how much should I spend in case it does happen to reduce the severity of that event when it happens. And so boardrooms are really wrestling with that. And part of the reason they're wrestling with that is it's not easy to estimate or calculate in advance what a cyber incident would cost. And that's what these CAT models do. They give you a range of potential costs from the worst to the best. And so that's why we're less concerned with the accuracy. That comes in with the sort of probability associated with all these outcomes. But what you are more focused on is that, it could have cost this little and it could have cost this much. And those are the realistic extremes. Right?
And it's the sort of, are we planning for that in that kind of general ballpark? And I suppose, Joe, to sort of take that analogy of the cyber world, everybody knows technology is moving very fast, so actually looking at the past isn't necessarily a predictor of the future. But I guess in your world of natural disasters, looking at the past isn't necessarily a predictor of the future, because you've got climate change, you've got an acceleration that nobody's really understanding. And can you just, in simple terms, can you just give us a sense of how do you model for so many different variables and so many different unknowns?
Yeah. So the historical record of events is an important piece of data, but it's not complete. There are gaps. And so what CAT models do is they're based on the idea of an event definition. And there's the historical events, but there's also variations of what could happen, which are similar to those historical events, event counterfactuals. But CAT models take it further into probabilistic event sets. So it's a simulation of all of the possible events that could happen, thousands and thousands of years of events, with some scientific basis for generating those events. And therefore, it gives a really good comprehensive view of risk over an entire region.
That's really amazing, isn't it, Erin? Because our world of technology, you're really thinking back, for an analogous system, it's only about like 5-10 years, maybe the whole of technology, if you were going for it like 50 or more years. But that looking 50 years ago wouldn't really give you any sense of our current dependence and the current losses. Whereas what Joe is saying, in natural disasters, you can go back thousands of years, and you could go back and understand maybe data that would not have been understandable to the people who were living at the time. Is that
We're
accurate?
not going back in history, but what we're doing is we're creating 10,000, 100,000 versions of what could happen to this year.
Gosh.
Yeah.
And so then you're creating multiple imagined futures.
Yes.
And how do you then decide? So you're not going, it's going to be this one. You're going on a range of probabilities. So you're sort of, I guess is this what they mean by the Monte Carlo modelling, or is this something different?
Yeah, so Monte Carlo is a random sampling approach. Just as you go to the casino and you spin the roulette wheel and you draw a random number, we use that in computer simulation of these events. And that helps you to play out all of the potential scenarios and all of the consequential impacts, just as a real event would happen. And that's why they're also really easy to kind of conceptualize how they're working, because they just replicate what's happening in real life and allows you to explore all of those scenarios. And that's why we use Monte Carlo sampling.
So most people, I would include myself in this, your brain starts to melt when there are too many inputs, too many variables, and it's an unknowable and unpredictable problem. So what sort of skills do you need to be a good catastrophe modeller, and what brought you into this as a choice of your career?
Which question first?
What skills do you need? How do you cope with all of that uncertainty, and how you've given me the technical answer, but the sort of there's a huge sort of different way of thinking. There's a huge kind of mental capacity that I would say most people don't possess. That enables you to sort of just go with this and keep going.
CAT models are produced by a certain type of expert for a different type of expert. So the people who produce them are kind of multidisciplinary. There's statisticians, there's computer scientists, there's seismologists, there's meteorologists, there's all of that kind of scientific kind of specialism. And then on the user side, in insurance, there's the actuarial and insurance experts. So the whole ecosystem, there's a lot of specialism across that, and that's why I think it's remained a very niche area and an area very difficult to open out to more people and more risk domains.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I was hoping to chat with you, because I think you're open to new ideas, but also to get Joe in to talk about the value these models bring to making decisions in the face of uncertainty. So to answer your question sort of directly, you have to break the uncertainty up into parts. And now I'll transition a little bit into ransomware, because I've been building this ransomware model with Joe. I can use it as an example that hopefully the listeners can, resonate with. So the uncertainties that we see in ransomware, for example, we'll start with the simple ones. Do you make the payment? Do you not make the payment? What proportion of people make the payment around the globe? Is that the same this year as it was 10 years ago or 5 years ago? No, it's changing over time. I see it's actually reducing.
And it's also difficult to find that stuff
Of course,
out, isn't
yeah.
it? Because people don't really say, and I want to do a deep dive with you on ransomware, but first...
Let me pause just a little bit and say you break up all the uncertainties into different parts like that. So you might have 5 or 6 questions. You break them up, and then you do probabilities of those answers, and then I'll leave it there.
Yeah, thank you.